And, of course, Dr. Tim McKnight is in with us to discuss health this morning. Good morning. How's your health?
Good morning.
I always like to check on your health. Does anyone ask you that? I mean, you're always checking everyone else's.
Not too often, but I feel fine, so I'm good.
Do you have another doctor that you go to?
I do.
Okay.
I'm not the best patient. I don't go too often, but,
But it makes sense.
I have somebody, yes.
So, all right. Well, today we wanted to talk about, it seems obvious, but again, we haven't talked about it for a while with COVID-19 because recently there's been quite the spike into record territory again for numbers of new cases every day and so forth. So what does this mean to you?
Well, it means life is a little bit busier and a little bit more chaotic. We're paying attention to the local and state health departments for their guidance, and we get updates regularly. We thought we had met level 4 criteria for a couple of weeks, but apparently now this criteria have kind of, some of those checklists have sort of dropped off the list a little bit. Mm-hmm. So, but nevertheless, the cases are definitely increasing. Everybody knows that, right? And we're seeing a lot of people in the hospital. The hospital's overwhelmed. It's hard to find places to put people that need to be hospitalized. Our hospital just recently has made a commitment to work with our sister hospital in Steubenville to take some of their COVID patients that are maybe not as sick to free up some of their beds. So we're dealing with it more than we ever have. And I've seen some of these people in the hospital, and most of them do okay. They're there for a few days and they go home, sometimes as long as a week. There's a real emotional connection when you see somebody that's young and healthy looking who is in the hospital and just struggling and not sure from one day to the next if they're going to get worse, if they're going to see their family again. Yeah. That's tough. But you have to step back and look at the statistics, which tell us that the mortality rate still is relatively low, 99.5% survivability, very low mortality rate. And it's those people who are older, 70s and 80s typically, with underlying health conditions. But obesity is a real interesting one because we've seen younger people with obesity really struggle with this. And that's all about being able to take a deep breath in. When your abdomen is big and you're trying to push that diaphragm down against that big belly, it can't push down all the way. You can't get enough air in. And that's what these people are suffering from. It's air hunger. And when you look at them, if you put them on a pulse oximeter, just a little clip on their finger to see how well they're oxygenating, they look like they're doing okay. But when you get a blood cast and you find out how much oxygen is in their blood, it's low. And they really are feeling like they're starving for air. So now, with any activity,
taking these people in general, are they not maybe having that difficulty a little bit before the COVID?
Well, that's hard to say.
But that's a possible symptom?
Oh, yeah, sure, that's a possibility. Yes, absolutely. And for people that aren't active and they aren't used to getting that diaphragm to push down. So, staying active and having a close to ideal body weight is good. There's not much you can do about your age. But, we've seen older people in the hospital. I'm talking 80s and 90s, and they do better. It takes time. But it's just unpredictable, and that's what makes it scary. But just remember that the mortality rate is still low. It's the sheer volume of numbers going up. And I think the recommendations, as hard as this is to stay socially distanced and to not be with family at Thanksgiving, that's hard. But I think really the wisdom behind that is we're trying not to overwhelm the hospitals, because the last thing we want is for someone to come to our emergency room and we have no place to put them. And we've struggled with that. Every hospital
no matter
has.
What they have, heart attack, broken leg,
Sure.
Because the beds are full. The beds are full.
That's right, yes. And so we're trying to free up space in our hospital to alleviate some of that burden on Steubenville's hospital. For any of those other conditions that we can manage at our small hospital, we'll take some of these patients to make it easier for them to carry the load that they have.
Do you feel like there are degrees of this virus where someone gets it badly and somebody else just gets a touch?
Absolutely. That's the strange thing. Somebody will lose their sense of taste and smell and feel like they've got allergies and they're positive, and the next person, boy, they've got classic flu-like symptoms. Fevers, chills, aching, cough, and you kind of smell that. That's COVID almost, and then we test them and they're positive. We're not seeing a lot of influenza, which is interesting, but we are seeing a lot of this COVID virus. So it's tough. And one thing we're getting a lot of in the office is people calling, they want to be tested. Well, if you've got symptoms, any flu-like symptoms, I am happy to test that because that's suspicious. But if you've been maybe exposed to somebody but you got no symptoms, I'm not really sure there's value in testing that because you're likely to be negative. But what happens if this is the first day of your illness and you're not really sick yet? We're going to need to test you again probably. So it's really the bottom line for patients when they're positive, we're telling a half a dozen patients a day, sometimes more. Your test was positive. Stay home and quarantine for 10 days. Take over-the-counter medicines to control your symptoms. If you get worse with your breathing, come to the emergency department because it's the breathing issue that really is the question. Do they need to be hospitalized? Do we need to monitor this closer? Otherwise, you stay at home like you would with the flu and you get through it. So it's tough. There have been times I thought, boy, I wish I could just get it and get it over with because a lot of people don't do that poorly. But then you see somebody younger and healthy that's struggling, and you think, I don't think I want to take that chance. Yeah. So my advice to everyone is do the things we're being asked to do.
I know the contact tracing has become a lot more difficult with all these new cases. Aren't we all going to be exposed to it eventually?
Absolutely. And again, that's a great point. I tell people it's like water. It's going to go where it wants to go. And in time, it's going to kind of be this wave that penetrates through every nook and cranny in the state and the country. And so whether we're exposed to it now or in 3 months when we come out of quarantine or whenever that is, we're going to be exposed to it. This is a virus. It's a contagious virus. It's in the cold family. It's going to mutate. Just like the cold and the flu mutates. We're going to see this again and again. So I think the new norm is get used to this, but don't fear it. I tell people eat healthy, get plenty of sleep. I recommend vitamin C and vitamin D and zinc as preventive measures, and use good hygiene, but try to live your life. I certainly hope that we're not closing down businesses and schools, in the near future every time we get a wave like this, because I think, it's in a way it's survival of the fittest, but most of us are healthier than we think, and we're going to be okay. But there's such fear out there because of the focus on people that are dying these miserable deaths. And that's unfortunate.
Well, that's my fear is the mental health and the stress, because if you and we talked about who's at risk, most of those people are exposing themselves, I guess, to media which is sensationalizing the terrible aspects of this, and so they're panicked. And I think that leads you to be more vulnerable to getting a disease or breaking down.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. There's a lot of misinformation out right now about everything, and it's so hard for all of us to filter through that. But you use common sense. And remember, you've got an immune system that has been fighting viruses your whole life. Fighting bacterial infections. Most of us would probably still be here even without antibiotics. So we're pretty healthy individuals, and this is just another wrinkle that we're being exposed to, and we've got to learn how to deal with it. But initially, I think the response was wise, but now I'm starting to question: are we going overboard with this? Do we just need to try to move on safely and let this thing pass, and let's put it behind us?
Kind of scale down, maybe a little at a time. You think?
Yeah, nobody has all the answers, but I just know when I look at the numbers, it's very high right now, and there's a lot of explanations for why we see more of this in Tuscarawas County and all over the country. But it's going to pass, and eventually the numbers are going to die down. But we're not done seeing COVID virus. Like I said, it's going to mutate. It'll be around. But I hope the fear behind it is somewhat dampened, and it's not as overwhelming to us in the near future, because we really need to try to move on. I'm not sure about this vaccine. The drug companies are saying 90 to 95% effective, right? the flu vaccine has never been that effective. I don't know how this vaccine will be that effective. I mean, these are drug companies trying to get their first foot in the door
Sure.
with this with a vaccine.
Yeah.
So, anytime there's a new drug or a new molecule that comes out on the market, I'm personally leery for 3 to 5 years, because often you see these taken off the market because of the bad outcomes that they didn't see in the initial studies. So as much as people want to jump in and get this vaccine and have a real quick fix, you got to step back and think about this. There is no perfect prevention for this. It may be useful, but I'm not going to be the first in line to get it, I'll tell you that. And a lot of my healthcare workers feel the same way. So it's, and people might not like that. They might disagree with me, but I'm thinking through. I'm looking at the big picture here with this and trying to come up with the best conclusion I can.
Well, that's because you're fit for life, and you might also add to that fighter for life as well.
I'm definitely trying to do both. You're right.
Hey, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot. That's Dr. Tim McKnight here on our Talk with the Doc segment. And there you go. COVID-19 is not something you should fear. And this morning's Talk with the Doc has been brought to you by Mako's Pharmacy, offering their customers and community free assistance with comparing and selecting a plan based on your specific prescription needs. Call Mako's Pharmacy. They're 740-922-5400.